At some point, he was hailed as the best physique in the world, tipped to become the undisputed king of bodybuilding for years to come, hyped as the next Arnold, and idolized by the man himself.
From the day one when I saw Bertil compete in London at the Mr. Universe contest, I was a big admirer of his. He is like the new bodybuilder to see. I mean, he is like the big time of today.
But then, somehow, his story ended with a double murder conviction and death row. Ever since he stepped on stage, brutal Bertil Fox was different. The 5'8", 245-pounder was an early mass monster before the term even existed. But when he was announced fifth, they were on the verge of a riot. His dream was over right then and there. He couldn't bear the loss, and it changed him forever. Beneath the rugged, impregnable look, the smile, and the aura that was a deeply insecure man, and behind the charismatic, humorous muscle man were allegations of roid rage and deadly jealousy. From a bullied, insecure kid to becoming Arnold's favorite bodybuilder, to a death row on a Caribbean island, this is the brutal downfall of Bertil Fox. Born in 1951 on the small eastern Caribbean island of St. Kitts, Bertil was still a toddler when his family crossed the Atlantic to join his father, who had already found steady work in England. They settled in northwest London in the kind of neighborhoods where Caribbean immigrant families clustered in post-war Britain. From then on, Bertil grew up identifying as entirely British. "I'm 100% British," he later said. "I act and I talk like an Englishman, not like someone from the West Indies." But England didn't always return the sentiment. His family was part of what's now called the Windrush generation, Caribbean families who moved to the UK in the decades after World War II and were met with prejudice and discrimination at nearly every turn. Young Bertil experienced that firsthand. At school, he was bullied mercilessly, taunted, and sometimes beaten. Some of it was racial. Some was the natural cruelty of children. There were days he ran home to his mother in tears and desperately needed a way out. He soon found one on a screen. The image of Steve Reeves as Hercules planted the idea in his head that the only way he could stand up for himself was by building up his body.
Bertil was quite secretive when he actually started because I don't think he didn't want to know how long he was training. But Bertil started very, very young. He was this skinny little narrow-shouldered kid that no one would ever believe would develop in such a massive muscle.
By the age of 15, his prodigious natural strength and genetics helped him pile on muscle so fast he couldn't keep his training secret for much longer.
I always wanted to be big, building muscle. I just enjoy training and I want to be the biggest human being with muscle on earth. I just enjoy training. It's my thing. It's my baby,
It seems like I've known Bertil ever since he was a babe. When I was competing in my heyday in London, Bertil was about 14, 15, but a 14, 15-year-old that everybody talked about.
First of all, he was a very shy person, very shy, easily embarrassed. Bertil was genetically gifted, like very few people are.
I've never seen another bodybuilder grow that fast. Every year, Bertil was much bigger than the previous year. There was a guy who seemed to have been born to be a bodybuilder. Few black bodybuilders start off with good calves. Bertil had great calves always. His proportions were impeccable. Almost a loss for words describing Bertil because Bertil happened at a time when there was nobody else like that.
The young teen was already training under a man who looked like a finished product. Henry Greaves, a future NABA Masters Mr. Britain, who drilled into him an old-school doctrine. The raw material was extraordinary. According to a July 1981 issue of Bodybuilding Monthly, Bertil started at around 160 pounds with a 37-inch chest and 12.5-inch arms. Just 2 years later, those arms measured 18.5 inches. In 1969, at just 18, he won the Junior Mr. Britain title. The next year, he won it again. The year after that, he won it a third time and added Junior Mr. Europe for good measure. But real life doesn't pause for trophies. By his early 20s, Bertil had a wife, Kim, and a growing family to feed. That meant driving London Underground trains for 8 hours a day, a job he hated. Then training for 2 hours. Then going home to his family. It was a humble, working-class existence for a man with world-class genetics, and it was exactly the kind of ordinary life he'd picked up barbells to escape.
He would say to me, Roman, I hate running up and down those fucking tunnels like a rat. It was always the part of his plan to do it, use London Underground and use the job for as long as he needed to. And he would say, boy, I'm going to chuck all this in, and one day they ain't going to see me and I'm going to be off and I'm going to hit the big time.
He would soon hit it big time indeed, as his breakthrough year was just around the corner. In 1976, Bertil won Mr. Britain, then went on to take the medium class and overall title at Mr. Europe, and added the AAU Mr. World title, including the most muscular award there. That same year, he came within reach of the very top when he finished second in the medium class at the amateur NABA Mr. Universe behind Japan's Gozo Sudo, on what was then the most prestigious amateur stage in bodybuilding. He returned to the same stage in 1977, and this time he did not stall just short of the top. He won the medium class, and then took the overall title. By that time, Bertil Fox was no longer simply one of Britain's top bodybuilders. He was Mr. Universe, and a newly crowned pro who would create a shocking upset on his very first pro contest. Bertil walked into 1978 with huge momentum from 2 stellar seasons, seeking the Pro NABA Universe title. But this time, it wasn't going to be a walk in the park. Participating in this contest was Serge Nubret, the former NABA Pro Mr. Universe winner in 1976, and a man whose reputation had already been magnified by high-profile Olympia appearances, including a second-place finish behind Arnold at the 1975 Mr. Olympia. Serge may have looked more elegant, but to many people, Bertil looked more decisive. The crowd voiced their opinion as they chanted Bertil's name over and over again.
First of all, it began with a thumping on the ground, foot stomping. They gathered around the judges and they pushed the judges forward. It was quite scary.
The judges gave the fans exactly what they asked for. And in his first pro contest, the 27-year-old walked away with the title of Pro Mr. Universe.
Serge was very, very upset at being beaten. And then afterwards, he claimed to Oscar Heidenstam that it was rigged against him because the audience influenced the judges, and he asked Oscar Heidenstam to reverse the decision and place him first.
Bertil's name was spared throughout the land, throughout the gyms. He was like a messiah in a way, and they loved him.
In 1979, Bertil returned to defend his NABA Universe title and won so convincingly. There wasn't even a pose down between him and the runner-up, Dave Johns. Back-to-back Pro Universe titles. Total dominance. And yet, he was still driving trains for a living. Europe could give you trophies, but it couldn't give you a career. If you wanted to turn muscle into money in that era, there was only one address, Joe Weider's world. The IFBB, the Olympia, and the magazine machine that turned champions into household names. That was the gravitational center of the sport, and it ran through California. Weider offered Bertil a contract. It should have been the easiest yes of his life, but he hesitated. He had the physique to stand alongside anyone in the IFBB, but not the confidence. He was wary of being used or ripped off. The same insecurity that had followed him since childhood was now dressed up as caution. Eventually, Kim forced the issue. She wrote to Weider, secured the deal, and pushed Bertil to accept it.
Bertil gave me every possible reason why I didn't go to America. He gave me all the English cliches. America's too much of a rat race. This guy's too much into making money. It's racist. He's a black guy. He's more at home in his little pool in London.
Because Bertil enjoyed being the big fish in a small pond.
I soon discovered that I was wasting my time trying to persuade Bertil, so I turned over to Kim. 2 weeks later, back in California, they signed on, and Bertil came on. On reflection, I wish I had never persuaded Bertil Fox.
The move changed everything, and not all of it for the better. In Britain and Europe, Bertil had been the man, but the moment he stepped onto the IFBB, he was just another contender learning a new system. His first year in the U.S. brought a fifth-place finish at the 1981 Belgian Grand Prix, and a hard lesson in how differently things worked on this side of the Atlantic. But the next season, he came roaring back. At the 1982 Night of Champions, Bertil finished second behind only the ageless Albert Beckles, a result that announced him as a legitimate Olympia threat and earned him a spot on the biggest stage in the sport. "I must win the Olympia," Bertil declared. "My fans believe that I'm the only person in the world who can stop me from becoming Mr. Olympia. I believe that too, and I won't let them down."
Our competitors for this year's 1982 Mr. Olympia competition.
This year, Bertil looked like the biggest physical force in the lineup. He was thicker and more heavily muscled than almost anyone there. And when he flexed, he looked spectacular.
The two thickly muscled guys in that show would have been Bertil and Casey. I think they were the version of Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman for that day. Thick, full muscle bellies. The fans, of course, loved Bertil because he was from the UK.
But against the best men in the world, size alone was not enough. The judges saw a physique that still lacked the sharper finish and complete presentation of the top men.
He was a bit like Casey, a bit awkward in his posing, and the guys that were winning back then were doing it on conditioning, and the size wasn't so as important then as it got to be in later years.
Eventually, Bertil was considered too incomplete, landing him in 8th place. This didn't do his confidence any good. To the crowd, he was the smiling, confident giant. But deep down, the skinny kid from St. Kitts never felt that he was good enough.
Bertil did not like competing. Beckles and Fuller and all those guys blew him away, psyched him out.
Because Bertil knew he was better than those guys, but he lacked what it required to go and stand next to them on a stage. Those people knew Bertil was a phenomenon. They knew Bertil was better than they were, but they soon discovered that Bertil did not have self-confidence.
Bertil would come to my place depressed as hell, and Bertil was never fat. He was always almost in contest shape. And I took him to my bathroom and the mirror, took his shirt off, made him pose and all that. He says, "I don't know what it is. I don't look like that in my mirror." But he couldn't see it. Bertil never got over being a little boy from St. Kitts.
Whatever his self-image issues might have been, the reality was far different. By 1983, he was being hailed as the best physique in the world, not just by fans and magazine writers, but also by the man himself.
From the day one when I saw Bertil compete in London at the Mr. Universe contest, I was a big admirer of his, simply because he represents the traditional bodybuilder and strongman. Overwhelming muscles with a nice V-shaped body, huge delta, small waist, and great proportion. But he also has enormous strength, and he is as strong as they come. I mean, I've seen him bench press way over 500 pounds. I've seen him squat way over 600 pounds and do flies with 120s in each hand. I mean, things that I've never seen anybody do.
I mean, this guy was just pure muscle. Weeder was going to do a photo session with Bertil. I walk in and he's doing these curls, and I knew that the dumbbells they used were fake because he was going like this. It's easy. I'm not exaggerating like this. He was warming up for the photos. I said to the photographer, I said, "Hey, those balsa wood things look real at first." He says, "Jerry, they're not balsa wood. Listen." And I heard the iron clanking, and my mouth dropped. They were 90-pound dumbbells.
I remember in Northridge, California, seeing Bertil Fox for the first time. I thought, holy shit.
He had this pose, when he did the most muscular, when your arms go away from the body, they tend to look much smaller. Right. His didn't. They look like legs.
Yes. It's hard to categorize Bertil Fox. He was a type of physique and in a class on his own. He had the nickname Brutal Bertil, and there's nobody around today that I would say that reminds me particularly of him. He was somewhat of a genetic freak, because I've never seen another bodybuilder that had that body shape and that look that he had.
I remember looking at this guy and saying, you could shoot this guy with a bullet. It looked like it would
never go through.
He was so damn thick.
He is like the new bodybuilder to see. I mean, he is like the big time of today. I'm really looking forward for him to win the Mr. Olympia contest and to take the whole scene, which is around the corner. I think that he has a great chance in 1983 at the contest in Munich to win the Olympia. And then as soon as he does that, he will keep it for a long time because he's, of course, young and has still many years to go.
On paper, Arnold's prediction made all the sense in the world. The contest was wide open with no clear favorite, but the fans had one guy in mind.
You don't realize what a bodybuilder, an athlete actually goes through. You've got to be really disciplined. I think it takes a lot for an athlete to actually do that.
Bertil Fox.
Bertil walked on stage as a 210-pound enigma. He was dense, violent-looking. He came in hard enough that people could no longer dismiss him as just a mass monster with flaws. He looked spectacular, thick, explosive, and dramatic, the kind of bodybuilder who could make a crowd go wild. And they did.
Bertil stole the show with about 2 minutes of most muscular poses, and he posed to Sexual Healing with Marvin Gaye. Just brought the house down. I mean, the fans were just screaming. I never seen fans go crazy like they did for Bertil that year.
In fifth place, Bertil Fox, England.
Bertil looked stunned and disengaged as if he'd been struck by lightning. Ben Weider warned him not to walk off stage, but he ignored him and left the platform. And the fans' reaction wasn't any more graceful.
They went crazy. They started booing and they started throwing pennies. They were whizzing by our heads. Judges were ducking under the tables.
Bertil had brought the most dangerous version of himself, and yet it still wasn't enough to earn him a podium finish. This event was what many people point to as the moment that changed him forever. By this point, Bertil was no longer competing against the men on stage. In his mind, he was competing against the sport itself. "They will never give me the Olympia," he said flatly in a 1985 interview, arguing that judges should reward size, density, definition, and mass. Someone who has built a body, instead of letting other considerations cloud the decision.
Everybody knew he was won it. He said, "Fox, nigga, all of them." You know what I mean? He lost it. He said he was gutted. That's his only real big regret.
The tragedy of Bertil Fox is that he was only half right, because the judges did have real reasons to hold him back. The Flex 50th Olympia Souvenir Edition captured the paradox perfectly. He was, perhaps pound for pound, the most muscular man on the planet. But something was missing. His back couldn't match Samir Banou's, and his posing was clunky. The mass was undeniable, but the flair wasn't there.
The problem with Bertil, again, relates to the posing thing. When he did a double on bicep, you're supposed to kind of go like this to show the bicep. He would go like this, hold his elbows all the way in. Arnold supposedly worked with him because he looked at Bertil and he said, this guy should be winning everything. And Bertil, the next show, went back to his same crappy pose. Like what hurt Bertil was his horrible posing.
Well, speaking of Arnold, he was at that show in Munich. I guess he was cheering loudest for Bertil. He thought Bertil should have won.
After the decision in Munich, Bertil returned to his hotel room and didn't want to speak to anyone. Kim consoled him through what he called the most disastrous incident of his career, but the damage went deeper than one bad night. He grew bitter and became increasingly vocal about his resentment toward the judging establishment.
You know, your whole future depends on those 5 or 10 little guys that lies there. Your whole fate lies in them. These guys have never trained. They've never worked out. They don't know what the word diet means. They don't know what it means to diet till your head begins to spin. We are bodybuilding. Then some fat guy in a blue jacket who's never trained, never done anything, who puts you and says, you should be a little bit more cut and shit like this.
Bertil Fox hated white people. He always felt that they were trying to use him. The guy was in a sport controlled by white people. Joe Wheeler is white, he's Jewish. The people who own the magazines are all white. Bertil was wrapped up in an inferiority situation where whites were concerned.
Years later, in a 24-page letter to photographer Chris Lund, Bertil denied it. "I have never told him that," he said. "I am no bloody racist, you know that. Please, if you write anything from these letters, please put that straight for me. Most of my friends are white, including girlfriends." True or not, the bitterness was consuming him. Like Mike Menser before him and Nasser El Somebody after, Bertil couldn't bear the loss, and it began to change him from the inside out.
He's one of those head cases that he didn't drive. He had that anger management, testosterone thing going on, very low self-esteem, great bodybuilder, got fifth in the 83 Mr. Olympia and was never the same. It crushed him. Defeat crushed him, and it changed who he was as an athlete because he thought he should have won.
He would do things and come to my apartment and tell me, "Oh, I wish I hadn't done that." What made me do that? When he beat up Kim. There were times when Bertil would ask his wife to go buy him stuff from the supermarket, stuff that no amateur bodybuilder would even dream of eating because of the immediate effect. Salted cashew, for example. Bertil knew he shouldn't, but he would send her to buy 2 or 3 tins of it, huge tins. She refused because she had learned enough by then, telling me he shouldn't. He'd beat her. She would have to get it. If she went and got it, he would beat her too. He'd do it, and then he would be sorry and think with himself. Come to my apartment and cry. I would have to talk to Kim later on and tell him to be patient and all that kind of stuff. I discovered in the States a time bomb ticking away.
And his wife worked in the Uyghur office, and she used to come in with like black eyes and slopes.
God.
So he said, "What happened to you?" She said, "Oh, I ran into a door." And I mumbled to somebody. I said, "Yeah, a door named Bertil Fox." Bertil Fox had a temper, let me tell you. And we were all sitting in a restaurant, me and a bunch of the pros, we were waiting for the meal to come out. And Bertil Fox just had this temper tantrum because they were taking too long to bring out his food. I thought he was going to kill somebody. You got to understand, John, we were laughing and talking just a minute before, and suddenly Bertil says, "Where's the food? Where's my food?" And then he started going crazy, And everybody's trying to calm him down.
And then came 1984, the year that should have been built on Bertil's uncrowned status. But instead, his momentum completely snapped. He'd been in hard preparation for the Olympia in New York. Peter McGuff recalled visiting him in a Nottingham hotel room in September, where Fox was booked as a surprise guest at the British Championships. McGuff described him as restless and furious that he couldn't train, demanding food and insisting he wouldn't miss a single day with the Olympia just weeks away. But he never made it. He pulled out of the contest, citing a back injury, though people close to him told a different story.
They got this call. To my surprise, it was Bertil. He told me that he was preparing, and Kim called and said that I'm leaving. I've left the apartment. So he just packed up everything, went back to California, just ceased preparation for the Olympia, and she was gone. So Bertil walked into my place, all depressed. I don't know if I should get into the contest. Maybe I should get a doctor's certificate saying I'm ill. Bertil looked absolutely out of this world. I had him doing his favorite pose, which was the most muscular pose. Here we do this whole muscle together. He went from pose to pose, arm shots, back shots, and out of this world, dominoes and everything. And he said, "But I only look that way in your mirror. I don't look that way in my mirror." He broke the contract and did not compete. And he did, in fact, get a doctor's certificate saying he was ill. Bertil did not compete in the contest.
After that, the clean upward arc of his career was gone for good. In 1986, he was 7th at the Olympia. By 1987, 12th. By 1989, he was still relevant enough to place 6th at the Arnold Classic and 11th at the Olympia. But the pattern was unmistakable. And with Lee Haney now deep into his dynasty, the door had closed.
What is it that keeps you going?
It's love. It's hard. I've had more setbacks. I don't think they can do anything more with Bertil Fox. I turn up in shape and I turn big. They says, "Oh, you haven't got enough cuts." When I turn up in cut, they say, "Oh, he's too lean." Because these people can destroy you. They can play trick with your mind. You can be in great shape and they got you and they ignore you. I should have been overall Mr. Olympia ages ago. For some funny reasons, there's always some obstacles in my way. I have a rough idea of what I would like to do. By the moment, I just sort of keep it to myself and just hope that it works out.
His last IFBB appearance came at the 1994 Ironman Pro, where he placed 13th, closing his competitive chapter, not with one traumatic final collapse, but with a slow dimming. The real collapse would come shortly after. Bertil decided to go back home to St. Kitts, the island he'd left as a toddler and hadn't seen in over 40 years. He took his savings from the Weeder years, built a house there, and opened a small gym filled with state-of-the-art equipment. Chris Lund had warned him before he left. Bertil, you don't know anyone down there. England is where you spent all your life. Fox would later write back from a prison cell, "My friend, I wish I had listened to you." Inside his attempted second act was the relationship that would become the center of the tragedy. Swimsuit model Laoka Brown was 18 when she met Bertil. He was 44. By late August 1997, he and Laoka had been together for roughly 2 years, but the relationship had been stormy from the start. According to some people on the island, he was possessive and domineering. One person told the Daily Telegraph magazine about an incident in which Fox had grabbed Laoka by the hair and thrown her down a flight of stairs.
He was a controlling person who wanted to dictate her life, tell her where to go. He used to even stop her from visiting her family.
It didn't have a bright future. As far as what my mother thought about the relationship, she felt like it was a very bad idea.
I wish Laoka had told us what was going on between Bertil and her. We might have been able to help. He would have hated us too, the way he hated her mother, because she knew. And she tried to get her out of that relationship.
Tired of the alleged abuse, Laoka finally wanted out. She broke up with Bertil, and he couldn't accept it. In late August of '97, Bertil was out of the country and called Laoka twice, trying to win her back. But she wasn't interested. By the time he'd returned to the island in September, Laoka had already taken up with another man.
Yet again, another woman has done it to him. White people doing it to him. His wife did it to him. And this girl has done it to him again with a white guy. You know, Bertil Fox. I would have been enough to blow him right out of the sky.
3 days after returning to the island, Bertil visited Laoka at her mother's design shop. And what happened next is something only he really knows for sure.
Well, about 10:16 a.m., we received a call by the 911 emergency line that 2 persons had been shot on Kearn Street. It was a shock to me that 2 persons had been shot, and my first thought was probably might have been some person involved in a drug trade or something. But the thing that was domestically related was the last thing on my mind. It was 10 in the morning, very broad daylight, somebody walked and shoot somebody. It was really caught us by surprise.
Violet Brown was declared dead by 12:30 that afternoon at the age of 36. She was killed by a bullet to the neck. 20-year-old Laoka died approximately an hour later from a gunshot wound to her back. It was the first double murder in the history of St. Kitts.
I remember when it happened, I told Joe about it, and he said, what a shock.
Yeah.
But we're not surprised, are we? Because all the signs were there.
Bertil's first trial took place in February 1998. His defense was simple. After returning from his trip abroad, he'd gone to retrieve his gun and pouch from Laoka at her mother's shop. Violet came at him holding the weapon. A struggle followed, and the gun discharged twice. Both times, he said, while it was still in Violet's hands. The prosecution told a different story. Fox had returned home, gone to the shop, and deliberately killed both women. His best friend Edmund Tross testified against him, telling the court that Fox had admitted the killings to him without ever claiming it was an accident. And on May 22, 1998, a jury of 6 women and 2 men took 3 hours to convict him on both counts. And the claim of an accidental struggle didn't hold, given that Laoka had been found shot in the back. Years later, in his letter to photographer Chris Lund, Bertil attacked the fairness of the trial, alleging the jury foreperson was a friend of the victim's family, that witnesses who weren't even at the scene testified against him to take over his gym, and that the media had poisoned the case with roid rage narratives. Peter McGuff, the editor of Flex, offered a blunter read. Fox was a loner, even among loners. When he self-destructed, it always was somebody else's fault. He was the victim. Under Commonwealth law in St. Kitts, the penalty for murder was mandatory, and Bertil Fox was sentenced to hang. He sat in a cell in a prison built in 1840 to hold captured pirates and waited to die. But roughly a year after his conviction, a London-based organization called the Death Penalty Project took on his case, providing free legal representation. They presented a psychiatric report to which the judge gave substantial weight and argued for leniency based on Fox's prior good character and lack of any criminal record. In March 2002, in a landmark ruling, the Privy Council found the mandatory death sentence unconstitutional. 6 months later, Fox was resentenced to 2 concurrent terms of life imprisonment. The noose was off the table, but freedom was not. For the next 15 years, very little happened. Bertil sat in prison, the bodybuilding world moved on, and without steroids, proper nutrition, or the thousands of pounds of iron he once lifted, the body that had defined him dissolved. The 245-pound man became 205, then less. Some reports suggest he eventually wasted to around 154 pounds.
For a time, I was told he worked out in prison with buckets of water and so on, makeshift weight. I'm told he doesn't even do that now. That must be hard for a guy who always thought, no matter how he looked in the mirror, he saw some little guy poking back at him. Imagine what it's like now looking at himself. I don't even know execution can be worse than what he must be going through right now.
In 2018, his legal team launched a new campaign. Under St. Kitts prison rules, long-serving inmates were entitled to periodic consideration for release. By then, Fox had served over 20 years and was in his late 60s. In May 2022, his case was finally heard by the Mercy Committee. On August 4th, 2022, the Governor General signed a pardon, and Bertil was released immediately. He entered prison as a 46-year-old man who could bench press over 500 pounds and left as a 71-year-old, weighed less than the barbells he once lifted. At the time of making this video, Bertil was 75. According to his son Sean, he returned to the UK and is now living as a free man. He has given no interviews, made no public appearances, and has issued no statements. Whether that silence is peace, shame, or simply the exhaustion of a man who has nothing left to say, no one outside his family knows. And the truth of what happened on September 30th, 1997, walked out of that prison with Bertil Fox.